The Perfect Dictatorship, China in the 21st Century, by Stein Ringen, Hong Kong University Press. Chapter 3, What They Do. Today's rulers have two main strategies of self-preservation. With one hand, they purchase legitimacy in the eyes of the ruled. With the other hand, they keep down anything that can threaten their hold on power. The way the regime deals with society is through an intricate good cop, bad cop act. The means of control are hard, brutal, and ruthless. China is a police state with omnipresent, overt, and secret security forces. The military is an internal as well as an external force. The judiciary is under party control. Persecution, intimidation, imprisonment, often arbitrary and often unlawful. Torture, beatings, these are rampant. When the regime saw itself under threat in the uprising in 1989, it turned to political murder as a means of control. Censorship over what is considered dangerous information of expression of opinion is harsh, including the Great Firewall against threatening uses of the Internet. The press is under government control and as much an instrument of propaganda as of information, never mind free debate. And so effectively is the Internet. Propaganda and thought work are integral to governance. The means of purchasing legitimacy are many and sophisticated. The regime maintains and cultivates an ideological identity through the branding of itself as socialist, and now possibly a dream factory. These are flexible brands which, however, hover over all government activity as part of a superstructure from which the regime claims its mandate, much as previous Chinese rulers claimed to rule by a mandate from heaven. It takes further legitimacy from its own strength. It liberated the country, gave it reasons for pride, has held it together, and kept external and internal threats at bay. It delivers and thereby claims the right to rule. The claim to delivery includes the maintenance of stability and order. That is important. Until very recently, the living memory in China was of deadly disorder. That was true of the century of humiliation from the Opium War around 1840, of the internal disorder in the 19th century, the Taiping and Boxer rebellions of 1850 to 63 and 1899 to 1900, respectively, which were really civil wars, of the warlord era into which the Republic of China disintegrated after 1916, and the Civil War leading up to 1949, and of the disasters under Mao. The current rulers are without doubt right that the Chinese people want order. They know what its absence means, and can trust the people to thank them for providing it. It is true that its order is haphazard and has come at a high price. But in the eyes of the Chinese and against their historical experience, it is not surprising that some order at a price is better than no order at an even higher price. But it is also sensitive. The most recent disorder that caused by Mao's despotism, and that included the worst famine in human history when conservatively estimated 30 to 40 million people died, was the work of the same regime that is now providing order, and that present rulers bask both in continuing the communist rule and in leaving the communist past behind. It takes legitimacy from economic growth, from having brought population growth under control, and from having given its people economic freedoms. Freedom to own, freedom to do business, freedom from poverty, freedom to consume, freedom to be rich or hope to be rich, freedom to dress, behave, and travel much as one wants. There are limits, but historically minded Chinese, or many of them, know that they have never had it so good, and the regime is able to claim, not without justification, that it is to be sacked. The purchase of legitimacy through economic growth has come at a price. One part of that price is pollution, contaminated soil and groundwater, and mineral and environmental depletion, blights throughout a country that can only be described as atrocious. Equally atrocious is the blight of graft and corruption which intrudes into the daily lives of ordinary people. A further blight is rising inequality, both between urban and rural areas, and between rich and poor within urban areas in particular. China is now one of the most unequal countries in the world in the distribution of income and wealth, competing with South Africa and 2 or 3 Latin American countries for the position as the most unequal country, marked for poverty at one end and extreme riches at the other. We know from survey evidence that these blights, pollution, corruption, and inequality are on the top of the list for ordinary people of what they find burdensome and objectionable in their living conditions. For now, the regime has the strength it needs to exercise the control it wants. It is able to contain the unrest that simmers in the far reaches of the land and has the means to crack down where and when it needs to. Throughout the territory, there have in recent years been about 500 mass incidents a day, mostly local reactions to land seizures and mistreatment of workers, and mostly easily manageable. Its Achilles heel is legitimacy. It enjoys much less loyalty from its people than admirers are prone to thinking. The regime lacks the authority of ruling by force, of consent by the ruled. That is a great weakness, and is the reason it cannot make do without the brute force of dictatorial control. On the occasions when it has relaxed its controls and encouraged or allowed free debates, the 100 Flowers movement in 1956 to 57, the Democracy War movement in 1979, and the liberal period that culminated in the occupation of Tiananmen Square and similar activities elsewhere in 1989, the debates turned to a demand for democracy and against the regime and was crushed. In 2014, young people, mainly students, organized a massive manifestation in favor of democracy in Hong Kong by occupying core areas in the city's business center. The Chinese government, which has ultimate authority over Hong Kong, wisely refrained from interfering. But there should be no doubt that the men in Beijing took note that in this part of China, where people have freedom of speech and express, young Chinese, when provoked, took to the streets in a demand for security, say in public affairs and democracy. So this is, as dictatorships always are, an ugly regime. The rulers do what they can to pretty themselves up, but the combination of dictatorship and consent is an unsquarable circle, in China as elsewhere. Wherefore distrust, wherefore the fallback on controls, which erodes trust again, which enforces more controls, and so it goes on. The matrix of power. The pillars of power in the Chinese system are 1. The party, 2. The military, 3. The executive, 4. The legislature, 5. The police, 6. The judiciary. The party, the military, and the executive are the three overpowering and nationwide bureaucratic systems. To split these pillars apart as separate from one another is an oversimplification, since in reality they are deeply intertwined, albeit with the party at the top of the power pyramid. When the government congratulated itself on its achievements in its works report to the 2014 National People's Congress and added that they had not come easily, it expressed its thanks to, in this order, the correct leadership of the party's Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as General Secretary, as well as to the concerned efforts of the whole party, the entire armed forces, and all the people of all of China's ethnic groups. In the 2015 report, only the Central Committee and Xi Jinping got explicit mention. These central organs stand on layers of local government, generally in the form 1. The country is divided into provinces, of which there are 33, including 5 that are called autonomous regions: Tibet, Xinjiang, Inner Mongolia, Guangxi, Ningxia. 4 directly administered municipalities: Beijing, Shanghai, Chongqing, Tianjin, and 2 special administrative regions, Hong Kong and Macau, both with separate political systems and, Hong Kong in particular, extensive internal self-rule. Provinces, but not directly administered municipalities and special administrative regions, are divided into prefectures and prefecture-level cities, about 300 in all, some of which are being phased out. 2. The next level is that of counties, sometimes called municipalities, including county-level cities and urban districts, in all about 3,000 units. The counties report upwards to provinces. 3. Counties are divided into towns, townships, and urban subunits, districts and subdistricts, in all about 50,000 units. 4. Below that level again are villages and somewhat similar urban units, communities, street offices, neighborhood offices, and the like. Almost 700,000 in all. These are administrative villages, some of which are big and distinctly urban in real economic and social structure. There are many more real villages, many of which are small communities within administrative villages, towns, or cities, and many of which are vanishing under the force of urbanization. Within villages and local urban units, there are various administrative subunits and committees that extend the reach of party and government down to the micro-local level. This matrix of authorities, one next to the other, and the levels from central to local, makes for a rather complicated grid of public management. It is big, the largest bureaucratic system ever created. At least 75 million people are in jobs paid for from the public purse, not including government-owned enterprises. It is fecund in a document-based political culture, producing a never-ending stream of papers in a formalized system in which the various central and local party and government organs issue decrees that range from orders that are to be implemented to the letter via instructions or decisions to be implemented with local discretion and circulars for information. through to mere opinions, which, however, underlings who wish to be in favor are well advised to keep in mind. It is obscure. There are organs, committees, bureaus, offices, and so on in abundance, but the actual pattern of governance, according to conventions and practices, are fluid and constantly changing and cannot be read out of any organizational chart. The bureaucratic monster is made up of thousands of units, committees, and agencies that report to each other, boss each other, and control each other in ways that are rarely straight and clear. Posts and committees that are separate in authority overlap in membership. Who really decides what, does what, and reports to whom is always ambiguous. One of the consequences of size and complexity is that it takes enormous energy from the top to get policies followed up and implemented down the line. The leaders are light years away from being able to just decide and get done. They cannot get more than they are able to put systematic and relentless pressure behind. If they want to get anything done at all, as opposed to just deciding things, they are forced to prioritize, to choose what they want done, and let other matters lie. Administration is omnipresent, but policy, by necessity, selective. One of the consequences of the radicalism of economic reform that was unleashed by Deng Xiaoping was a lack of experience and knowledge in the leadership about how to run a market economy. There was, for example, a naive belief that social problems would melt away as economic growth rolled on, so that social protections could be removed without consequence once growth was unleashed. From the outside world, the reform process may have seemed straight enough. Inside, however, it has been convoluted, twisted, and characterized by continuous trial and error. That is still the state of affairs. The four main levels of government are nation, province, county, and town. These form a hierarchy of command from top down. The People's Republic is a unitary state with, in principle, no division of power between national and local authorities. Villages, however, are constitutionally autonomous and not part of the hierarchy of command. They are different from the other local authorities in that the village leadership is nominally elected by the people of their village. Direct election at the village level have been in operation since 1998. The experience is that these elections, and certainly the selection of candidates, have mostly been controlled or manipulated by the village party, and sometimes village clans, and by town cadets from above. In a much-noticed case in 2012, a revolt in the fishing village of Wukan in Guangdong province led on to village committee elections in which the leaders of the revolt won control over the committee. But 2 years on, since the party does not forget or forgive, higher-level party authorities had regained control over village politics and started to reinstate party bosses who had been ousted in the 2012 elections. In towns and higher-level units, the leadership is appointed from above and hence answers upwards to their superiors. Practically, however, villages and equivalents are the lowest administrative units in the system and far less autonomous, in fact, than in constitutional principle. On the other hand, the higher-level local authorities, towns and up, which are constitutionally subordinate to the national government and to high-level local authorities, have more autonomy in fact than in constitutional principle. Although China is formally a unitary state, the provinces and lower-level units have powers that de facto make it a federal state. This local subdivision applies to party, executive, legislature, judiciary, and security services so that roughly the same institutions are reproduced on each level. There are, for example, People's Congress at the various levels down the line, at the village level called assemblies. Only the Supreme Security Services, the People's Liberation Army, and the People's Armed Police have separate local organizations of their own. The PLA is divided into 7 military regions, which cut across provinces, and the PAP into 45 divisions.